For being here today. We do have some seats up front. I promise you, city staff don't bite, we don't bite. You're welcome to come sit up front if you want to move forward. I will call this Tigard City Council meeting to order. City Recorder Krager, please call roll.
Mayor Lube.
Here.
Youth Councilor Bogle.
Here.
Councilor Shaw.
Here.
Councilor Singh.
Here.
Councilor Wolf.
Here.
Council President Hu.
Here.
Thank you. If everyone will stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Does the City Council or teammates have any non-agenda items this evening?
None from us, Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you. We don't have any proclamations this evening, so we will move on to public comment. If you'd like to give public comment by phone, please call in now to get into the queue. The phone number is 503-966-4101. And there's also information on the public comment protocol. And we will start with follow-up for previous public comment with Assistant City Manager Nyland. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll keep this brief as I know you have an especially important meeting and conversation queued up. So at the March 19th Council meeting, we received 22 written comments from 18 individuals, and we had one person provide comments in person. There were no callers or video participants. Regarding the written comments, all were in opposition of safe lots, and everyone did receive an acknowledgement and reminder about tonight's meeting. The in-person commenter also received a response from the utility billings team offering information, resources, and different avenues of support. That is my update for this evening. Have a great meeting.
Thank you. We did have 13 comments for written comments that were received yesterday by noon. 12 of them were for safe lots, and one was for regarding illicit massage business. We will move on to public comments in person. When your name is called, please come on up. You have 2 minutes to speak. There's going to be a timer going off. And I just ask that you make sure that the microphone you're in front of is green so we can hear you and anybody tuning in remotely can hear you. And the first person we have is Diane Cassidy. Come on up. Welcome, Diane. Yep, there's just a button right on front if you could push it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diane Cassidy. I live in Lake Oswego, but I have a business in Tigard. I own Hunsinger Professional Center, an office complex that's at the top of Hunsinger Road. I was surprised last year when I discovered that I had an illegal massage parlor on my property. When the management and I looked into ways to get rid of it and evict the business. It was difficult because there aren't a lot of codes and laws that prohibit this. I have to back up a minute. The state has very strict rules about who they will license and the process they have to go through. But without a license, there's nobody checking to see, do you have your state license before you can get a city business license? So they mark down, people can mark down personal services as their business type, pay the $110 for a business license, and with that, they're legal to operate in Tigard. Now, their activity isn't necessarily legal. There are rules against that, but that requires that somebody prove that they are acting illegally. If the city could change its business code, the licensing codes to require proof of state licensing for the facility and the individuals working before they even, as a condition of getting a business license, that would be a huge step in preventing these businesses from setting up. It would also give the city a tool to simply use codes and code enforcement to get rid of them. I like to say the business owner has to prove they are legal before they get a license. Otherwise, the city has to prove they are operating illegally after they have a license and are already operating.
Diane,
So-
I'm sorry, you're out
Oh,
of time.
Okay,
We did receive your written comment,
Okay.
and so we will be following up with you.
okay, great.
Thank you. Next individual, and one of the things that I forgot to say.
I evicted them.
In general, I know there's a lot of you here regarding safe lots. We're going to have some comments and a lot of robust discussion. In order to maintain decorum and ensure that everybody can hear, there's no applause, cheering, booing, heckling, or general disturbance from everyone. We are watching. We see all of you. So if there's something that you agree with and you want to let us know that you agree with it, feel free just to raise your hand. I won't call on you and ask you questions. I know that's not what it's for. It's just to let us know that what's being said you agree with. So again, everyone can continue to hear, and this business meeting can go forward. So I just want to level set that expectation. Next individual is Caleb Peterson. Come on up, Caleb. Welcome.
Hi, I wanted to talk about safe.
And can you turn the other one off, because then there's weird feedback. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Caleb. I do street outreach in Tigard and Greater Washington County. As an outreach worker, I've had firsthand experience with every shelter program in Washington County, from emergency weather shelters to congregate shelters, tiny home and pod shelters, family shelters, and on-site support motel programs. To me, the safe parking locations stand out for their uniqueness. Unlike traditional shelter programs focused on maximizing occupancy, safe parking prioritizes individualism through a person-centered approach by keeping its locations small scale and only allowing 2 to 3 vehicles at a time. Safe parking has a housing placement rate of 76%. If all shelters achieve this level of housing placement, the rates of chronic homelessness would drastically decline. Yet this program comes with fears around diversifying neighborhoods to be inclusive of all socioeconomic classes. Safety, exposure, distrust of the system. Similar concerns have been expressed to me by people who I've assisted transitioning into these programs and applying for them. However, once they move into safe parking, their worries dissipate. They no longer have to worry about figuring out where they're going to park at night or fear their car getting towed because they have to leave for a couple of hours. They gain access to essential facilities, including storage and bathrooms, and they begin to talk to a caseworker about their future. Witnessing someone discover hope is truly beautiful, but safe parking surpasses mere discovery by transitioning that hope into a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. Tracy Webster. Come on up, Tracy. Welcome.
Hello, my name's Tracy. I am a former.
Can you by chance just pull the microphone a little? You don't have to take your mask off if that makes you uncomfortable, but pull the microphone forward a little bit.
Okay, is that better?
That's excellent. Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
So-
Can we restart her time, please? Thank you.
Okay. I am a former participant in the safe parking program. It did, in fact, save my life 3 times. It gave me a safe place to sleep. I could not go into a shelter because I have some issues of waking up in the middle of the night screaming, and it was very embarrassing. So I wasn't going to go into a shelter. I have since been rehomed, rehoused, right next to Just Compassion, which is a whole other story. But really, people, if you don't have anywhere safe to lay your head at night, you cannot sleep. You're always on edge. And when you wake up in the morning with police and shotguns, wondering why you're there, even though there was no parking signs, it gets really scary. And then you just don't want to go on. I was able to access help. I was able to access showers. I was able to have a bathroom at night. And before you say it brought a whole bunch of bad people, it really didn't. There was 3 of us there. We all got along really well. The police would come once a night just to drive by and make sure everybody was okay. If we weren't okay, the emergency line was always right there. So think about it. It helps, and it's not something where anybody had people coming in and hanging out and partying and stuff like that. That was different situations that I experienced when I was homeless. So that's what I wanted to say. It really does help. It really does. And if the churches that put it on, I mean, bless them. Bless them. It was everything I could do to pull myself up, but that did give me a lift to where I did get rehoused within probably 6 months. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Mary Post. Welcome, Mary. Oh, can you press it one more time so it's green? Thank you.
Okay. I volunteered with Just Compassion, and I was one of the lucky ones who got to make a friend of a woman who was on her own in her car with her dogs. She couldn't really be in a place with lots of other people, and she was in a safe parking in Beaverton. And I got to go and see her, which normally you don't do, but I was taking her things for her pod and taking her barbecue. And I had a hard time finding the place, and it was so quiet, and it was gated, and every day police would come by just to make sure that they were safe and that nothing was being done with them. And that lady that I met got a job. She's been on her own now for a couple of years, and she was, she just had the luck of the draw with things that happened to her family, and she ended up being on the street with nowhere to live. And it's something that is different from being in the shelter, very different, and I just think it definitely has its place, and people need to know it's not a place where these people don't have their friends come in. They can't do that. They're there, and they're there because they want off the street, and they know they need help, and they're willing to get help, and it can make a real difference in their life. So I'm definitely for it.
Thank you, Mary. Severin Hamilton. Welcome, Severin.
Thanks again for taking your time. I live right next to Christ the King Lutheran Church, and made aware of the Safe Parking Program a couple days before the info meeting. And following up two wonderful stories, and a gentleman's outreach is challenging to take the opposite side. I'm not for the Safe Parking Program at the current location of Christ the King Lutheran. I've had lots of conversations with Vernon, with Steve, with different council members via email, and it's not about the merits of the program. I think it's about the location. The previous woman talked about it was being a gated community. It was a private, everyone knows now where Christ the King Lutheran Church is. It's right on Bull Mountain Road. It's a small congregation. It's not, in my opinion, a vibrant congregation that's welcoming and good neighborly. I mean, Pastor Dorothy didn't come over and tell me about the program, so that was a bummer to find out the way we did. So those kind of things lead me just to have a concern that a safe parking program is great, but location is really key. We've happened to visit the Beaverton Safe Parking Program that the gentleman that spoke at that night talked about, and it was great. It was off, it was secluded, it was tucked away, and it was a great spot where people had privacy, those individuals in the community, or in the program. But Christ the King Lutheran Church is not that site, and obviously with the school there, the relationship that Pastor Dorothy had with Heidi, and how that went south is unfortunate. She was dealing with homeless issues before then, and now she's basically being kicked out, for lack of a better phrase. So I have concern. I have concern not with the veracity of the program. I think we need to be compassionate, help people who experience houselessness. but the location is really crucial. And the way this kind of started, I was sharing with Steve, it created an unfortunate series of events that I think moving forward with Christ the King Lutheran Church as a site would not be a good choice. So thank you.
Thank you, Severin. Just for clarification, the Heidi you were referring to is the preschool teacher, not me. There's not that many Heidis
Yes,
in that.
forgive me. Yes, Heidi Livingston, not Heidi
clarification.
Loops.
Yeah,
Forgive me. Yeah.
Thank you. There's not that many of us. Lisa Getz. Welcome, Lisa.
All right. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I gave public comment over the phone actually last month, and I'm here again in support of the Safe Parking Program and really more broadly the city and the council's efforts to address houselessness, low housing supply, and lack of affordable housing in our community. I would first like to encourage the city to provide more avenues for discussion about these topics and about the city's efforts to address them. There's a lot of, I believe, disinformation and misunderstanding being spread specifically about the Safe Parking Program, but I think it's bigger than that. Maybe not misunderstanding, but lack of understanding or possibly even unintentional ignorance. And I believe that opportunities for genuine and ideally small group discussion are essential. Secondly, I would like to strongly encourage the city to work with all resources available from the state and nonprofits to build more affordable housing in Tigard. I bought my first home in River Terrace in 2022. Pretty much once a week or so, I drive down River Terrace Boulevard and I just look around. I'm so happy to see more houses being built in my community. At the same time, I'm very disappointed to know that most of those houses will be $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. That is absolutely unaffordable to a very, very significant portion of our community, especially young people. And because of our land use rules in our state, that means that we are driving people out of our community. When we use up land that's within the boundaries for $800,000 houses, people need to leave Tigard, right? So again, I'm very happy to see more houses. I appreciate all the work you've done for River Terrace and the UGB expansion, but I just encourage more affordable houses. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Soraya? Sarayi?
It's Sarav. Sorry, I know.
No, I appreciate you spelling it, yeah, and I still managed to butcher it. Welcome.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I am a Tigard resident who would like to come out and express my support for the Safe Parking Program being proposed at the church on Bull Mountain and 99 West. I think this program provides a unique opportunity for Tigard to address the people being affected by the housing crisis in Oregon and Tigard. I was looking over the numbers for the Safe Parking Program in Beaverton, and given the success rate they've seen over there and the impact they've been able to make over the past 4 years, I think this is something that the council and us residents should really be doing everything in our power to support and expedite, as this could have a huge impact for the people involved. I'd also like to point out, given the reports that Beaverton has been putting out about their version of the program, that there have been relatively few incidents that you might associate with programs like these, like disturbances or noise complaints or crime, and that they've been able to move a lot of those people that took advantage of this program into permanent housing within a relatively short amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Saravi. Kim Marshall? Welcome, Kim.
I'm going to take my time and say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to have this conversation. I'm actually going to thank everyone behind me that is being respectful and kind and not shouting at each other, because the listening session at Christ the King was not that. So thank you, community, for being willing to have a dialogue and a conversation around this. My name is Kim Marshall. I'm the Executive Director of Project Homeless Connect. We do non-congregate sheltering here in Tigard and also one-day events. We are in, of course, support of the Safe Parking Program through the leadership of Megan Cohen, who is here tonight at Beaverton, and Just Compassion, one of our partner agencies in this work around homelessness. This program has proven itself over and over again to be successful, and it is not going to harm or hurt the community at large. Thank you, Council, for considering multiple locations and being willing to continue the conversation to make this viable for our homeless friends. We need to have all the prongs in place for those that are sleeping on our streets or sleeping in their cars on our streets. I really do appreciate it. I do see Hallstad, our library director, on the call this evening, and want to thank her for her time and dedication and work that she's been doing with working with our homeless friends that visit the library. It's another important place here in the city of Tigard that's engaging in this conversation. And I also know our interim chief is at the back of the room, and the work that the police department do with this as well, engaging with our friends, working with the businesses, and just building community is just a really important piece to this. So ultimately, I'm just here to say thank you. I look forward to hearing from Kim Azil. I know how much work she's put into this, and working on both sides of it, understanding the community at large and their concerns and fears, and then working towards solutions to help our homeless friends. So ultimately, thank you.
Thank you, Kim. And we have Ed Trumke. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not a resident of your city. I'm a resident of Lake Oswego, but I am a city attorney in a number of cities. And I came because I heard this conversation was going to be taking place tonight, and I thought that the public should know the position that you are in, the council. You're in a very uncomfortable situation because we have a constitution that says that churches can carry out their ministries. And if those ministries mean that they should minister to the poor, the sick, they get to do that. Chokes me up a little, excuse me, because my church does that a little bit. But you have to address also the concerns of your citizens, and your citizens don't always want that in their neighborhoods. Now, the constitutions of both the federal government and the state say that the church has the right to do what it wants to do as long as it doesn't unduly affect other people. And the state has responded, the state legislature in 2021 responded by adopting a statute that says that you folks don't have really any discretion in this. The state preempted the field, if you will, and laid out a few conditions that says that if churches, governments, or a few other nonprofit kinds of companies follow half a dozen steps, then you must approve and allow them to have emergency shelters in almost any neighborhood in the city. You really don't have any authority to say otherwise. The public needs to know that. I have to advise my city councils the same thing, and I'm sure your city attorney, I shall be, we used to work together. Your city attorney will advise you of that later on tonight. But the public needs to know that. If they get heated and really want to come after you, that's misplaced. If I may go 3 or 4 seconds over.
3 or 4 seconds.
For example, if they try to recall you, that's wrong. You don't have any authority to say no. They should be talking to their state legislators, the governor, and the state agencies, not you, if they don't want to have that in their city.
Thank you, Ed. Is there anyone who, I know we have a sign-up list and there's a lot of people here who haven't spoken. I want to provide the courtesy if anybody has decided that they want to provide public comment. Yeah? Yep, you need to come up and state your name for the record.
Hello, my name is C.B. Wright, and thank you for this opportunity, especially unscripted. I live right across the street from Just Compassion at the Knoll, which is a low-income building that is focused on veterans often. And we are impacted by Just Compassion by having a lot of activity in our parking lot that is not welcome, as well as at the advice of the police, we put up no trespassing signs because folks that are in the day program come and hang out around our building. And our cars have been impacted for, if any door is open, things go missing for over a year. We are impacted by on-street parking on both sides of Knoll every day, every night. And we've had instances where folks have come into our building and stayed in our, hopefully, lobby overnight, coming in after residents. And it's not the residents' job to notice that and move people out, so we had to get a hold of our manager. So those things are ongoing all the time. And most recently, the signs that said no trespassing have been removed, and not by us. So we're imagining that we'll be more fully impacted once folks move in. And it doesn't feel safe to me, period.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wold, are there any phone callers in the queue or any requests to comment by video this evening?
Mayor, there are no callers in the queue and no requests for video comment.
Okay, thank you so much. We will now go to City Manager Reimer for the City Manager report.
Well, thanks, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, councilors, members of the community, and my teammates that are here. Just a few updates for you tonight before we move into the agenda items. First, I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. We appreciate all of your perspectives and being engaged in your community. So we're looking forward to a continued conversation, as we've talked about before. And tonight is not the last of our conversations about all of our services to address those that are experiencing houselessness. Just a few things for our community and all of you. For those that are considering solar on their homes, we have a program coming up this Thursday night at the library at 6:30 called Solar for All, where it's a chance to shine the light on solar energy options. And we're going to be working with our partners with Solar Oregon and the Oregon Clean Power Cooperative. So this Thursday at 6:30 at the library for those interested, as a way to continue to advance one of your key goals to address climate change. Also from our library, as you know, we talked about a couple weeks ago, we hosted a Holocaust Remembrance program. And also, often individuals contact Halstead and others at the library to share their thoughts. And so we wanted to share this with you. A huge thank you to the Tigard Public Library. While playing with the TV remote and changing channels to find a program, I could not turn my attention away from a program you sponsored. The wonderful and brave speaker who told her family's hellish story of escape and arrival in Portland, and I am still watching it now. So just kudos to our library again and many of our community partners for always bringing different programs for our community members to join in person and as you see through video. Thank you to all of you and Rick and Shasta and Jessica and Moises and Orlando for going on tours of Reservoir 18 up at Sunrise Park. Some of you may know about that project as well as going to some of our new water quality facilities in River Terrace, just to really understand the different needs that we have for our water supply and the maintenance needs to make sure that we have clean water now and into the future. And last but not least, it's that time of year for the egg hunt this Saturday at Cook Park. It is sold out, sells out like a rock concert, I believe. But we encourage people to go on the wait list just in case we do have openings in the morning. And it's looking like we're supposed to have some really nice weather on Saturday, so hopefully we'll have another successful egg hunt. And that concludes my remarks. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks. It's always fun to watch the different age groups. I think it's 0 to 3, and they're a little slower, and then by the end, I mean, they're diving for those eggs. It's fun if you've never been. Next item on our agenda is a supplemental budget resolution for City County Houselessness Liaison Intergovernmental Agreement. And we have Strategic Initiatives Program Manager Kim Ezell to present. Welcome, Kim.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am excited to bring forward, not quite on this slide presentation yet, but an IGA that was proposed by the county. It is an agreement between 4 government agencies, City of Tigard, City of Sherwood, City of Tualatin, and Washington County. The IGA would fund the City of Tigard to hire 1 FTE to continue the city's work in responding to houselessness with a special focus on communication. The FTE would be shared between the 3 cities. 50% of their time would be dedicated to Tigard, 25% to Tualatin, and 25% to Sherwood. This IGA is also in front of Tualatin and Sherwood over the next week, and we're looking forward to being able to hire quickly before the end of this fiscal year. I'm happy to answer any questions about the IGA.
Are there any questions? Are you going to talk a little bit maybe about how this role may play into the regional discussion that we're about to have?
Yes, yes, I can talk a little bit about it now, but it'll also come up in the presentation that this is an additional resource that Tigard will have to respond to houselessness, in addition to my role, our Focus Patrol Officer, and a new CSO that are coming on board, all working together to try to address houselessness and make houselessness rare, brief, and one time in our area.
Excellent. Are there questions or a motion?
Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number 24-08, a resolution to adopt the fiscal year 2024 Houseless Service City Liaison Budget Supplemental.
Mayor, I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, will the city recorder conduct a roll call vote?
Mayor Lube?
Yes.
Youth Councilor Vogel? Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called you. It's a budget item. Sorry about that. Councilor Shaw?
Yes.
Councilor Singh?
Yes.
Councilor Wolf?
Yes.
Council President Hu?
Yes.
Thank you. And here again is Kim Ezell to talk about houselessness and safe lots. I just wanted to make a couple of comments before Kim starts in this presentation. Many of you may know, and welcome, come on up, I'll introduce you in a second, that at the beginning of last year, this council, every 2 years, we set new council goals. And one of the goals of this council is to reduce houselessness. And tonight we're having a council briefing, update, and discussion on the state of houselessness in Tigard and Washington County. You know, we have these updates periodically with all of our goals, but given the level of interest and discussion we're having around safe parking, we felt like it was a really important time to make sure we're doing a better job at communicating and sharing the information of what's going on. There have been a lot of moving pieces, including providers and funding sources. We get a lot of questions, what is this, what is this, where does this money go, why can't we do this? And it's really hard for those sometimes even in the know to keep track of everything. So again, I appreciate all of you raising your hand. We saw you. I ask that we continue to do that in these conversations and the questions that we're gonna have. And so with that, welcome Kim. And we also have the Beaverton Community Services Program Administrator, Megan Cohen, here with us tonight. Thank you, Megan. And I will turn it over to you, Kim.
Thank you again, Mayor and Council, and I want to thank all of our community members who are here this evening. This work is very important. I say this every time I come up here, but while I am the person who gets to speak and talk about this work, there are hundreds of people working on this cause across the region today, and they come from government work, nonprofit, and our private sector. And so I just want to recognize all of the work that's happening beyond just what I'm going to talk about this evening. Next slide, please. So to begin, we're going to talk about the houselessness response countywide and the coordinated effort that is taking place before moving into our focus of the evening, which will be on safe parking. We're also going to talk about a couple of safe parking examples in Oregon, which is why Megan Cohen has joined me this evening, and next steps in Tigard. Next slide, please. Just want to remind everyone, including city teammates and like myself, we always hold the community promise close when we're talking about establishing new programs, especially when it comes to a program that's going to affect this many people. So we're talking about our continued commitment to equity, embracing sustainability and the environment, being responsible with city funds as we move forward, really engaging in robust engagement with our community, which is what I'm hoping to begin tonight around the safe parking conversation, and setting ourselves a very high standard for excellence in all of our programming. Next slide, please. I also want to acknowledge the reduce houselessness goal for council and talk about some of the desired outcomes that council identified at the beginning of last year. I'll speak mostly to the first two this evening, but all three of them are important to this work. First one being creating more available transitional housing that includes wraparound services secured through our community service partners, and then also city support to our business community to offset the impacts of houselessness. And next slide, please. Over the last year, since that council goal was adopted, we've done a lot of work, and Tigard has put a lot of investment in, and this is just in the last year. There was so much more that happened before the goal was adopted. But in early 2023, when council set the goal to reduce houselessness, also hired the program manager to lead houselessness response, which is my role. Also in 2023, early invested $1 million in Family Promise of Tualatin Valley's purchase of the Quality Inn, which now serves 70 families as transitional shelter. In mid-2023, Tigard Police Department created a focused patrol officer position. This was a pilot. That position was dedicated to connecting with our downtown business and houseless community. Officer Orth has been in that position for the last year and has been making significant inroads connecting with all of our community members. We're happy to have him in that role. We also established time, place, manner guidelines as required by state law on where, when, how people can camp. And as part of that time, place, manner to offer more amenities to our community members, we added new porta potties and trash cans on city property. Going into late 2023, we updated our time, place, manner ordinance. We found that we needed to have some way for folks to heat themselves as well as to cook food. And we also created a business sustainability fund with the Chamber of Commerce, which goes into that third council outcome. This was to help offset any impacts that houselessness has been having on our business community and giving them a grant fund to address that. That wraps up last year, but early this year, we've already received a federal earmark for a community service officer dedicated to houselessness response. And as we talked about just a couple minutes ago, are signing an IGA with Washington County to hire a program coordinator for houselessness response. If you are keeping score, we went from 0 positions dedicated to houselessness response at the beginning of 2023 to now 4 FTEs working on a dedicated response to houselessness. And I think that reflects council's direction to reduce houselessness in our community and our continued work in that direction. Looking ahead, we will be hiring for that CSO and IGA positions, hoping to do that quickly, and then looking at beginning a safe parking program as a transitional housing option available in Tigard. Next slide, please. I want to talk for a second about supportive housing services. This is a term that gets tossed out around a lot, and this is the county-wide system of care dedicated to ending houselessness. So this is funded primarily through the Metro Supportive Housing Services tax. It's roughly $70 million a year. This was voted on by voters in 2020. It is currently in the 3rd year of its program. There's also some additional funding that comes from the governor's executive order last year and again this year. HUD grant, that's Housing and Urban Development, it's a federal grant, and then the Washington County Public Safety Levy also provides $2 million into that fund, and that's what funds a lot of the programs I'm going to be talking about this evening. One of the key portions of having this countywide system of care is that no individual city can house all of these programs, at least not with the size of Washington County cities as they currently are. So being able to have a portfolio of services across our entire county is really key to our success in reducing houselessness. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk tonight about 5 key strategies for reducing houselessness that are being undertaken in Washington County today. This While I will speak to all 5, I will say that the first 4 I'm going to give very brief overviews on. We could spend an entire evening talking about each of the 5, but I will be spending the most time on emergency shelter, and we're happy to coordinate additional briefings as we move forward. The first 3 strategies are affordable housing, eviction prevention, and addiction treatment and support. These are focused at reducing the inflow of folks experiencing houselessness. If you could click the button once. Next slide. There we go. Reducing the flow of houselessness. And then the last 3, so again, addiction treatment and support, and then housing programs and emergency shelter, are about reconnecting people with stable housing and addiction treatment and support. And it's the interesting job of being in both camps. We have folks who experience houselessness due to a substance use disorder, and then folks who also develop substance use disorders as a result of being houseless. And so being able to address substance use disorder on all ends of the spectrum is very important to the program. Next slide, please. Talk about affordable housing. This is the root cause of houselessness in Oregon. We have a crisis. We have a current housing deficit of over 70,000 units in the Portland metro area, with the greatest need being in the lowest income bands. Tigard has done a lot to try to address this in this area, contributing over $9 million in various funding to support construction of 595 units. That's over the last 5 years. There was the Regional Affordable Housing Bond for Washington County, which is creating 875 units. And then we've also offered local tax abatements to support existing affordable housing units. And going back to those 5 E's, when we talk about the responsible use of city funds, just want to remind everyone about how complex affordable housing funding stacks can be, and that every dollar of that affordable housing bond that Washington County put in was returned 3 times over by private investment in affordable housing in Washington County. So for every unit that we invest in, there's 3 more that are coming from the private sector. And Tigard has been leading in Washington County in creating those opportunities for development and developers in this area. Next slide, please. The second area, again, trying to address the inflow of folks into houselessness, is eviction prevention. This is funded by SHS. Over 400 households last year were able to retain their housing through eviction prevention. Some of that was being provided by Family Promise of Tualatin Valley. We might notice that all of our service providers do a couple of different things. No one gets to do just one, so they're also doing family shelter, as I mentioned. And again, sustainable use of funds. The cost to prevent an eviction is so much less than the cost to rehome a household. And this is absolutely critical to our community. We know that 44% of Americans cannot cover a $1,000 emergency expense without dipping into credit. And then when you couple that with the fact that Tigard is a severely rent-burdened community, which that means that over 25% of our residents, in this case it's 28.1%, spend over 50% of their income on rent, you understand that there is just not enough discretionary income to go around, and any time an emergency comes up, eviction prevention becomes especially critical. Next slide, please. Very excited about our addiction treatment and support resources that will be coming online next year. So this is funded by a combination of federal, state, county, and local funds, including Tigard's opioid settlement funds. These will be 2 buildings housed in central western Washington County, one in Beaverton and one in Hillsborough, one dedicated to intensive in-service treatment, and the second is a community service building with drop-in services available. There will also be houseless services that are housed within the center, as well as medical pathways. We know that folks who are suffering from substance use disorders often have other medical concerns as well, and so the Center for Addictions Treatment and Triage will provide pathways to get folks to other medical care that they need. Next slide, please. Finally, housing programs. This is really the bread and the butter of the Housing First model. Housing is the absolute goal for every single community member, no matter what their challenges are. Stable housing is key to stabilizing the rest of your life. There are 3 housing programs that are currently underway in Washington County. The first is the Continuum of Care Funded Grant Program. This is a new program that has just begun. It will pay for a deposit and 3 months rent. This is for folks who just need a little bit of support to get back into stable housing and otherwise able to self-resolve. The second being rapid rehousing, which offers assistance up to 2 years, and the last being permanent supportive housing, which offers 10 plus years of assistance. And I'll talk a little bit more about those last two on the next slide. Rapid rehousing. So the goal for this program is for folks to be self-sufficient in 1 to 2 years. Case managers emphasize budgeting, goals, education, and job skills. Last year was the first year for this program in Washington County, and 230 households were housed, with a goal of housing 400 this coming year. And then next slide. And then permanent supportive housing, and this is for folks who really need all of the additional support. These are folks who are chronically homeless, have a disabling connection, or are over 55. The client will pay 30% of their income towards rent, and then is responsible for utility, and the program pays the remainder. Next slide. The case manager works with them on many aspects of their lives, and the work really begins from my conversations with our housing case managers when the housing is secured. So they help with the unit search, but also furnishing apartments, enrolling in Social Security or Social Security disability income, helping with healthcare needs if the individual is able to work, helping with their training and hiring with partners like Easter Seals and WorkSource, and then general transition back into an apartment-style living, which can be a difficult transition for folks who have been living outside for a long time. And next slide, please. 636 households were housed last year, and goal is 500 more. That is 1,100 folks who were living outside or had no prospects for being inside who are now able to have permanent housing. There is 2 different ways that folks are served in this program. For most permanent supportive housing, and it's tenant-based, meaning that folks receive a voucher and then they're able to select their apartment unit, and their case manager works with them on that selection. But then we also have project-based sites, which are sites that are completely dedicated to folks who have experienced chronic houselessness and have a lot of challenges with their transition, and they have on-site case management. There are 2 project-based sites now. There's a 3rd one coming online, and more to come as Supportive Housing Services continues to work towards more permanent supportive housing. And the next slide, please. A final program I want to talk about tonight in our efforts to reduce houselessness is emergency shelter. So I'm going to start with our non-population specific, our least restrictive forms of emergency shelter that are available in Washington County, into our most specific. So the first is congregate shelter, and we've heard a little bit about that tonight. Just Compassion is our congregate shelter provider here in Tigard, but there's other congregate shelter available across the county. We have 20 beds in Tigard today, expanding to 60 beds by next year. We also have pod shelters that are available in Western Washington County. There are 3 locations with 30 pods each, and you'll think of those as kind of like those individual houses that are set up in like a large parking lot, whereas congregate shelter is more, I think, the generic what we think of when we think about houselessness and we think about what a shelter might look like. Next slide, please. We also offer all sorts of population-specific shelters. So I've talked about it already this evening, but we have family shelter. We have 105 households spaces available in family shelter. We have Family Promise of Tualatin Valley, providing 70 of those in Tigard, and then Good Neighbor Center is also providing space for up to 5 families in Tigard, as well as some other family shelter in Western Washington County. We have motel shelter that's available at 65 units. It's largely dedicated to folks who would not be able to be in congregate shelter. So we heard from one woman this evening who has some sort of panic attacks in the night, so those types of issues, not able to get to a bathroom in time. So we need to be able to have these types of shelter available for folks who are fragile in that way. We have veteran shelter that's available in Beaverton. We have bridge shelter. These are for folks who are imminently expecting housing, or are folks who are being exited from a medical institution, but their only available exit is into houselessness. And so but if they were exited onto a street, their health would immediately decline because they're not able to care for themselves adequately. So bridge shelter is an option for folks being exited from our medical institutions. We have youth shelter that is available, and then also domestic violence shelter. And the next slide, please. Finally, the last type of shelter that is available in Washington County, though not currently available in Tigard, is safe parking. There are 15 households that can be served, and that is all in Beaverton. You may have noticed that there could be a bit of a gap here. There are folks who have lost housing due to circumstances outside their control, but are still able to have and take care of a car. They may not qualify for population-specific shelter or on a wait list for something like a pod shelter. They have a vehicle that they own and are staying in temporarily, and when they look at the option between staying in congregate shelter and staying in their vehicle, they prefer to stay in their vehicle. And for folks who do not have a substance use disorder or a criminal history. You can go to the next slide just to show that a little more graphically. In this idea of what is the least exclusive, the least barrier to the highest barrier, we have congregate shelter, non-population specific, and it can be a very highly stressful environment. I don't mean this to say that congregate shelter isn't a deeply important and necessary and key piece to our system, but that it can be a highly stressful environment, and that there are folks who, if they can qualify for a different type of shelter and we're able to provide it, then we should. Then we have pod shelter, again, low barrier, non-population specific, but it is in demand with a long waiting list and much less stressful environment. And then we have our specialty shelters, which are low to high barrier, depending on the type of shelter, and extremely specific. And then next slide. And right where that arrow goes, next slide, is where safe parking ends up, in that it is a high barrier form of shelter and non-population specific. I also want to comment that while safe parking is non-population specific, there are some populations that are served very well in that. One of the things that we have seen is that 1/3 of houseless individuals in 2020 were over the age of 55, and that the largest growing demographic is folks who are 65 plus. So these are folks who we don't have specific senior shelter, and we do have some motel shelter for medically fragile adults, but there is a limited supply. A lot of these folks are able to still keep their vehicles and take advantage of safe parking in Beaverton at a very high rate. So being able to provide this type of temporary shelter for our seniors can be critical. And next slide, please. So let's talk in more detail about safe parking. Next slide, please. Safe parking is a type of transitional housing where a small number of households, generally 3 to 8, we are looking specifically at 3 in Tigard, can stay in their vehicle at a designated location. All guests must pass background checks and histories of sexual or person-on-person crimes. They must work with a case manager on a plan towards stable housing. As I said earlier this evening, our goal for every single person who is engaged in our services is to end up in permanent housing, and that is a requirement for being involved in this type of program. The guests must follow a code of conduct for the site, which is agreed upon between the neighborhood, the site, the city or the funder, and the service provider. The location must include a bathroom, hand washing station, and storage. And there is a no tolerance drug and alcohol use policy, which is the same as on all of our shelters. And next slide, please. In the model that we are considering, the jurisdiction is the funder and provide, oh God, there's a bug.
I got it. Okay.
That is not what I expected. So many things I didn't expect from tonight, but that was not on the bingo card.
I'll let you know if he comes back.
Thank you. Yep, doing great. All right, we have a funder. The city, which would be the funder or the jurisdiction, would have oversight on communications, location, any site amenities, and could enforce additional requirements like cameras or drug testing on the site. The service provider is responsible for the operations of the site, vetting potential folks who might stay there, dealing with any of their needs, and helping transition folks into permanent housing. And then the host site provides the location. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about what that ideal safe parking location looks like. So ideally, it is donated. Host sites are not compensated for their parking lot space. It's what makes faith-based organizations and city, county government properties so attractive. Low to moderate parking lot use. We want our guests to be able to sleep and not be disturbed. We would like privacy from both neighbors and the street. No one likes anybody looking into their bedrooms, and so we want to ensure that both for the neighborhood that surrounds the area as well as for the guests who are staying in the program. We acknowledge that some site improvements like fencing may be required in order to achieve this goal. And we look for roughly 8 parking spaces that can be designated 24/7 for the program. So why the 8? We look for at least a space or 2 for the storage pod, the bathroom, and the hand washing station, and try to space out the cars so there's at least half a space or so between folks' cars so that you're not dinging your neighbor or, again, looking into each other's cars at night. We want folks to have a little bit of privacy in their space. I do want to note that there is a couple of things that are not on this list. We have heard quite a bit of public comment about the risk to children and neighborhood safety that could come with these sites. We're going to talk about this in a minute when we talk about some of the different safe parking examples, but I do want to say that from all of our experience with safe parking lots and talking to folks who run safe parking lots, these do not pose any additional risk to children or to neighborhood safety, and that we may need to make compromises on what this location could look like, given that we don't have any spaces that are created for safe parking, but that this is, as far as we can tell, what the ideal safe parking location could look like. And next slide. Now I get to turn things over to Megan Cohen from Beaverton to talk about the Beaverton Safe Parking Program.
Thanks, Kim. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I am Megan Cohen. I'm the Program Administrator at City of Beaverton for Community Services, and I program manage and contract manage for our homelessness programming there, including the Safe Parking Program. Next slide, please. So the Safe Parking Program at Beaverton, we are actually on year 5 right now. The program came about because in 2018, the City Council in Beaverton passed an ordinance banning overnight car camping in the city. And at that time, we had a lot of students come out and provide advocacy that there needed to be another option for people who were living in their vehicle and had nowhere else to go. At that point in 2018, we started looking at what those options could be. We explored some programming down in Eugene, and within around 6 to 9 months, launched the Safe Parking Program in Beaverton. The site started with one city-owned lot, and then the goal had always been to have 5 site locations, which we were able to get to, I believe, in 2021. So we have 3 church lots and 2 government-owned lots. I am really proud of this program and the work that has been done. We partnered with Just Compassion to provide the site management and the participant management of this program from the get-go, and it was really a partnership for all of us in figuring out what this was going to look like and how it was going to work in Washington County. Obviously, we had no providers at that point that had experience doing something like this. And we decided to be hands-on in trying to figure out how to pilot it and make it work together. I think I really appreciate hearing tonight about all of the different initiatives that are happening in Tigard. I think, as we know, one solution is not going to fit for everybody that's experiencing homelessness, and it really takes a range of responses when we're looking at this issue all across the board, from city code enforcement, police enforcement, to shelters, safe parking, and other programs that are being made available from supportive housing services. So this is just one response in the variety of responses that Beaverton has when looking at the need to respond to homelessness in the city. I think I've heard several folks mention tonight, we do reporting every year of outcomes, and between 2019 2023, so everything up to this latest year, we've had 173 individuals served in the program, with 65% transitioning into housing from the program. That doesn't account for the folks who continue in the program at any given time, and most of those exits, we either see people self-resolving, or we see people who have decided that they don't want to follow through on a case management plan, and then appropriately figure out what the next step for them is going to look like. This program has been a partnership with the host sites, with our police department, with a lot of folks that have really bought into this program, welcomed their neighbors in. As we know, many of these folks, almost all of the folks that have been referred into the program are people who are already living in Beaverton. They're living in their cars in Beaverton. They've been referred into this program. They're already in our neighborhoods, and we're trying to find a safe, private place for them where we can give them a little bit of respite from what is happening day to day and work intensely on those case management plans to figure out what the next step is. Next slide, please. I think one client story we shared above just really highlights the experiences that we see people come into the program with. We have experienced just a wide range of people in this program in tough situations. I think, as Kim alluded to, and as we've heard tonight, we're seeing a lot of seniors that are on fixed incomes with SSI or SSDI, Social Security income or disability income, who are unable to afford the cost of mortgage or rent, and so we're seeing evictions or people lose their long-term housing. We're also seeing that with families. Just in the last month in Beaverton, we've come across 2 families that were living out of their vehicles. In both situations, parents were working in Beaverton but couldn't afford the cost of rent, and they both had children as young as 3 months up to 15 years. And those are situations that are very challenging, and figuring out how we can bring all of our resources to bear to figure out what the next step for people is going to be is really important. I think one thing that Kim has pointed out really well over the evening is that this program serves as sort of that transitional program. We often have people who already have housing vouchers stay in this program, or who are on family shelter wait lists. But unfortunately, right now, the wait lists for shelters are incredibly long, and the time that it takes to get into housing from a housing voucher is months. And so those are situations where folks just need somewhere to go, so that we're able to keep in touch with them and make sure that we're able to fulfill the housing that they're in line for when that opportunity becomes available. Next slide, please. Just a couple other things to highlight. One, we have a very strong relationship with the Beaverton Police Department. Even from the inception of the program, we actually brought police with us to see programs in Eugene, to talk about what the guidelines and program rules for the program were going to be, to talk about what it would be like to have folks on sites where we know we have things like educational children's programs also there, and they are our #1 referral source. So especially with time, place, manner ordinances, and with our Beaverton Bike Police Team, which is our primary police interacting with folks experiencing homelessness, they are making the referrals to Just Compassion and working with them to have folks transition into safe parking whenever possible. That means that there's another set of people that know who these folks are and who care about them and are connected to them, and it really, what we wanted for this program was for it to be building a community for these folks, for them to feel like they're part of our community, because we know when we create that belonging that it leads to better outcomes as well. Beaverton Police have also helped with things like helping folks reconnect with family, and just problem solving different things that come up on sites. you'll see at the bottom that overall we've seen that the program has reduced calls to police. Several of the churches approached us because they were dealing with issues overnight already, and having folks in the program meant that there was somebody who was always there who could make calls if something else was going on site, and also just has something visible there, right, to discourage folks who maybe are coming by to vandalize or do something else on the site. And we have seen that work out and really reduce what is happening on those church sites as well. Lastly, I think, as I mentioned, there's just an array of resources that come around this. So the goal is for stability and access to resources, which can include shelter, housing, employment, SSI, SSDI, and healthcare. And oftentimes it's several of those things. We do see people with very serious health conditions and very difficult, it's very difficult because of the cost of healthcare and navigating those resources. We've seen people with heart failure, kidney failure, and these are young folks that just have experienced a lot of hardship, and this is what it takes to be able to get them the support they need. And then lastly, we do have program rules that are focused on behavior and working towards those individual goals. That includes making sure that people are accessing case management on a regular basis. It means no violent behavior. It means no drug and alcohol use. It also means things like respecting quiet hours. And we ask host sites to just let us know what things might else be important on that site. We keep the porta potty and the pod locked at all times for those guests, so they're the ones that are accessing it. And there's things like, where do pets go? Where's a good place to smoke that's out of the way of everybody else? Can you access Wi-Fi? How do you do that? And our individual sites have really identified and grown out those resources as they gotten to know people. So we have places with on-site pantries, we have places that will do vehicle repair, and that has really grown over the life of the program to just come around folks and make that program even stronger. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the program and share the information and data that we've collected over the 5 years, and appreciate the opportunity to share with you all tonight.
Thank you, Megan. And I'm going to talk a little bit too about another program in Oregon, which is out of Redmond. Next slide, please. They're a little further away, so they didn't come in person, but I'll share their thoughts. So they have 7 safe parking locations, and again, a very similar program to what we're proposing here in Tigard. It's across 2 churches, 1 business, 2 service organizations, and 2 vacant government-owned lots. I will come back to the business because they have a very interesting story for how they got involved. It's a total of 29 spaces across those 7 locations, serving 40 to 60 individuals. Next slide, please. It's several essential components for a successful program. I'm not going to go through that list because it's very similar to what we've already talked about this evening. They did talk about staff time to prevent some hoarding behaviors, which is something that we'll keep in mind as we go forward, as well as cameras that stream remotely for case managers to check on any incidents that occur at the site. Next slide, please. One of their observations, and similar to what Megan was just discussing, is that program guests serve as an informal neighborhood watch at these sites. They value their safety, they value being a part of the program and having a safe place where they can sleep at night, and are the first to alert staff of any problems. They also said that night security has not been necessary, and they find it to be prohibitively expensive, and they've never used it because of this informal neighborhood watch. That property owners surrounding the property are often surprised at how quietly these sites operate, and they have also seen no increased calls to law enforcement. So I mentioned we come back to the business. The business specifically decided to be a safe parking lot because they were having issues with folks who were camping illegally in their lot. And they thought that the safe parking lot, especially with the time, place, manner rules that exist in Redmond, which are very similar to ours, which create a 500-foot buffer around any place that's hosting household services. So they wanted to have a safe parking lot and receive that 500-foot buffer to prevent camping on their property. And so they've been doing that, and they're actually expanding to a second site. It's a gym. So they have one gym, they have a couple gyms in the area, and they're going to move it to a second gym. Next slide, please. They also observed that there was no testing needed for drug or alcohol use. I know we've heard that from our community. They said that behaviors surrounding addiction become just very apparent. Things like having unauthorized guests on site, breaking curfew hours, missing case management appointments, and then being able to go back and check a video stream, and then they're able to exit folks from the program for breaking those rules. They would support up to 8 vehicles on one lot, which does seem like a lot to me. We are still only proposing 3, but thought it was interesting that they were willing to go up to 8. And they recommend at least 1 staff member to 25 individuals or 15 households. We're still proposing 3 safe parking lots with only up to 9 households, so well within Redmond's recommendations. And they've seen that their average stay is about 4 to 6 months, which I don't think Megan touched on, but is similar, I believe, to Beaverton's program. Next slide. So very similar outcomes, again, to what Megan shared. Last year, 96 people were served. Most went to positive destinations or are remaining in place and working towards their goals, and almost dead on 68% success rate with folks moving on to permanent sustainable housing. And next slide, please. So here we come back to Tigard and our next steps. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go a little bit out of order, and I want to talk first about exploring the city-owned parking lot option. So we've heard very loudly from our community that hosting a safe parking lot, and the first safe parking lot on city property, is what we need to do to show that we are really committed to reducing houselessness. And I agree completely. And so we are going to move forward with the first safe parking lot being on a city-owned lot. We are still exploring those options and beginning communication with the neighbors, and I'll go into what our communication planning will look like going forward, but that is our commitment. We do have also 2 potential church locations, but those are definitely taking a back burner while we explore the city-owned parking lot and establish a city-owned safe parking lot first, and that would be Christ the King Lutheran, which we've heard about this evening, as well as a second unnamed church that has expressed interest. And we have received questions about what the permitting process looks like for locations. As one of our public commenters spoke about quite extensively, HB 2006 supersites houseless services, so we have no discretion when a permit has been filed. On any discretion on yes or no, we must approve, or the city must approve, any safe parking location. Next slide, please. Talking about communications planning going forward, understanding that we need to do better when it comes to engagement with our community, and that tonight's conversation, I hope, is a nice reset and a first step, and that this is the first of many conversations around this topic. We've adopted this communications plan from the county's communications plan for establishment of any new shelter that they've been establishing. So beginning with one-on-one conversations with immediate neighbors of the location before expanding into public information centers and the sessions, and then doing a workshop with site partners, neighbors, others to get feedback on a neighbor agreement. What is a neighbor agreement? Next slide, please. So talking about things like what is the specific location in a parking lot to establish those 8 parking spaces, especially when we think about faith-based organizations or with city lots, we have a lot of parking spaces. So we do have some flexibility in where exactly we would want to site the service. Talking to the community about any necessary site improvements, things like fencing, cameras, etc., in order to really preserve the neighborhood feel and to ensure everyone's privacy. Creating a plan that everybody understands and can execute on for exiting guests who do not follow the site code of conduct. We don't expect to have many guests who need to be exited, but we do want to have that plan just in case. And having a contact person for community members, both who are staying on the site as well as those who surround the site, to bring concerns forward. And the next slide. Following establishment and that public meeting around that neighbor agreement, we will notify nearby neighbors once that site is opening and distribute that neighbor agreement that includes all of that material, including the code of conduct that any person staying on the site must agree to. And then we will continue at least once, we'll do 3 to 6 months after the opening of the site, have a session for feedback, but depending on what's going on at the site and the community feedback that we received at 3 to 6 months, we will reserve time for more community feedback sessions. And then next slide. The resources for the City of Tigard, the total cost for these 3 locations, we expect to be about $95,000. That does not include any additional site amenities. $30,000 would be funded through a community development block grant that was awarded to Just Compassion specifically for safe parking in Tigard. The remaining $65,000 would be funded by the city. That primary cost driver is the case manager that the service provider would provide. And just going back to kind of good bang for our buck, and I mean, this $65,000, we have at least 19 vehicles right now in Tigard with folks who are living in them. We know that this is an extreme undercount because folks who are living in their cars are mobile and they don't want to be seen. So being able to serve those folks 15 at a time, 9 at a time, but with a cycle that's getting folks into permanent supportive housing is going to be really helpful to our community. And next slide. And just to reiterate, what we will be working on next is exploring that city-owned lot. We will be opening a city lot first. We've heard the concerns around Christ the King and other neighborhood sites, and so really want to establish and learn lessons from the city lot before we move forward with any other location. Next slide. Thank you very much, Mayor, Council, community, for your time this evening. Happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much. That was a really long and exhaustive presentation, and I appreciate it. And I wanted to test the temperature in the room of everyone like taking 5 minutes, standing up, moving around. Are people interested in a break or keep on going? Yes, with breaks, just keep going, Council? Okay, well, we will keep going. I just wanted to check. So I also want to take, the opportunity to clear up some confusion and inaccuracies that I know have been floating around regarding the safe parking and specifically the proposal with Christ the King Lutheran Church and Just Compassion. As most of you know, if you were there, and it's probably what brought you here, Christ the King held a community meeting in January to discuss their proposal for hosting a safe parking lot on their private property. It was intended as an informational community meeting to discuss the idea and get feedback from the community, and I believe it spun out of control into something different. And while the church had previously been in discussions with the City of Tigard, I want to be clear, the city was not involved in planning for that January meeting. The city and I learned about the meeting about the same time as many of you. I found out through social media and I said, hey, what's this? I wasn't there as a panelist or to answer questions. I was really there to hear about the program and hear about the questions you had to understand the next steps forward. And really in that time since the meeting, we haven't been doing a cooling off period. I was on vacation for a little while. We were listening to your feedback. We were learning from those examples presented in Beaverton and Redmond. This is what the process of listening and continuing to work through the right safing program would be for Tigard. This is the right process for community engagement. Again, tonight is another step in that process, and I hope we're doing what we can to rebuild the trust with our community, because I know everything started off on the wrong foot. We're here to listen to you and listen to your concerns and listen to the examples and learn and figure out what the best program for Tigard is moving forward. I want to promise you a couple of things that will continue the engagement and discussions on this topic. As I said, tonight is not decision making. As you saw in our communication plan, there's going to be multiple steps along the way to have those conversations and to look at what those community agreements look like, to discuss those site examples. It's my hope that the City of Tigard, as Kim said, will lead by example and start with the safe parking on city property. I believe we have to, walk our walk. We can't just talk about what a great program this is and have it out in the community without ensuring that we've tested it and it's successful first. I also want to acknowledge that when change comes to our community, it's really, really hard. Especially when there's unknown, especially when it's in our backyards, and it feels like it's an immediate threat to our safety. It's our priority to keep all community members safe. everyone in Tigard. And with this discussion and these programs, I continue to sort of go back to the goal. What is the goal? The goal is to help people transition into housing and reducing homelessness. And I want to reiterate that I've said multiple times, it's unacceptable that anyone is living in their car, period. Every individual in our community deserves a safe place over their head. And this is a step in the spectrum of houselessness that helps those individuals work through there. 68% is, I think getting anyone successfully out of their cars and into housing is successful. And I know there are individuals who it may not be the right fit for them. And I have a ton of questions addressing what that looks like. I just want to say, for all of us moving forward, it continues to be a really tough and emotional topic for everybody in this room. And it's my ask that we continue to respect each other during this process and come in with the intent to seek and understand each other and hear each other's perspectives. It's what we have been doing, listening to everything, listening to the other side that you may not agree with, listening to the side that you do agree with. And my responsibility as an elected official and the mayor is to listen to everything and figure out a path forward. So I do appreciate all of you being here tonight and being a part of this really challenging conversation in our community. And so thank you for being here, and thank you for helping us with community engagement moving forward. I have a ton of questions. Some of them are my own personal questions. Some of them I think you may have addressed, but I kind of sort of want to reiterate them again. Some of them have been from all of your questions, and then we'll go to counselor questions. So my questions are a little peppered all over the place. And I just want to, one of the things talked about that I think is a narrative out there is about other cities not disclosing their sites and people not knowing where any of that is. Can you talk about whether or not that's accurate and what that actually looks like? I'm looking at either of you who wants to answer the question.
Well, why don't you talk about Beaverton? I'll talk about Redmond.
Sure. I can start with Beaverton. So with Beaverton, when we say we don't disclose the site, so we don't list it on any of our public messaging on our website, anything like that. The way that intake works as well too is folks don't get to choose between sites, learn about different sites, anything like that. The case manager talks to folks, figures out what might make the most sense. One of the sites might be closer to their work. One of them might be more accessible to the shelter and they need some services there, whatever that might be. There might be a good match between people that are already at the site, and then they make a placement for the person, and that's the first time that they see that site. That being said, of course, people know where our sites are. We have done community engagement for all 5 of the sites, which has, for us, looked like noticing any neighbors that are adjacent to the property and has often expanded beyond that. And held public meetings and done many of the things that Kim talked about in terms of host agreements and figuring out what might work best on any given site. But publicly, we do keep the site names off of that, and that's in part because we don't want people driving up to the sites. We want to keep those sites secure for participants and have them go through the centralized intake place.
Redmond, very similar. They also do not publicly list the sites anywhere, but if you Google Redmond Safe Parking, every site that has been approved has a news article attached to it. So you can find, if you are looking for them, the sites. I did hear a story from their program manager that some very well-intentioned people direct folks to go stay at the site, misunderstanding what its purpose is and that you need to be vetted, but that the guests at the site do a very good job of correcting that, and then the program organizers go back to the organizations that referred people to just go park in the location and correct that misinformation.
Thank you. For sites that aren't on city or government property in these locations in other communities, are they located in neighborhoods or business areas? Or a mix of both?
Testing my code remembering. So our city site currently is, there are, I would say the most adjacent properties are business properties currently. There is another government-owned site in our safe parking program, and it is pretty much entrenched directly into a neighborhood. There are some other businesses nearby as well too, but it's been a mix of both residential and businesses next door to the property.
Redmond is the same.
Thank you. Can you clarify, I think we heard some public comments about it, sort of the permitting the process, like who has the power to approve it? Does city council or I love people that think I have that power. The power to approve the site, the permitting, what does that look like when someone were to come with just a permit request?
Yes, so if somebody decided to fund this type of program on their own and filed a permit with the city, they could do so, and we must approve that permit, and then someone would be able to set up a safe parking program on their own. As the funder, taking the lead on this as the city, we're able to put in some additional stipulations that fall within like the operational context of the city.
Thank you. I think that's a really important misconception that's going around, talking about the difference between the permitting process and the funding process. The permitting process, is something that the city has to look at the permit and says, yes, it has to go there. So for clarification, again, if someone else were to come in and have the funding, they could literally put safe parking anywhere in Tigard. I think the important thing that allows the city as the funder to do is to engage the community, to engage the neighborhood, and come up with what that neighborhood agreement would look like, the requirements, what ideal thing, look at providing perhaps fencing or different things to help make that location better. So I think that's just a really important distinction to talk about. The reason we're able to have this more robust conversation is because we are the funding source. So I think, a lot of the comments that we've also heard, you referenced it a little bit, talking about kids in schools, but with Christ the King specifically, a lot of the comments are talking about the preschool program. And I believe if this were to move forward, the preschool program would not be going on anymore. So there wouldn't be that crossover between the preschool and the safe lot. But I also know that there are other churches in Oregon where safe parking is happening now in conjunction with preschool and school programs. Can you just talk a little bit about what that may look like?
Yes, so for Beaverton, we do have some church sites that have preschool programming or other types of programming on site that involves kids and youth. We have safe parking at several of those sites. I think one of the important things is that our safe parking program also has families with young kids in it as well. So safety is very important to us. We do background checks for participants of this program. Sex offenses is eliminating factor for folks to be in this program. And of course, person specific crimes as well too. What we are finding is that we have a lot of families in this program and that they will actually get connected to some of the youth programming that's available at the church. We have one church where they actually run a diaper bank, which we're all in a diaper desert here in Washington County, and so that has been something that we've actually been able to expand out to other sites. And it's really a priority to have safety for kids and youth, and of course for the adults in the program and at the sites as well.
Okay. I was just looking at you. Nothing to add, I assume. Okay. You talked about it briefly, and I know we also had some public comment about the Just Compassion shelter as it stands right now. And I think it gets a little confusing because Just Compassion, as you talked about, does many different things. And I'm seeking for some clarity because I'm not minimizing any sort of issues that may be going on with the neighborhood and parking situation. But I also want to talk about the differences, maybe again to highlight a day shelter, a congregate shelter, and the safe parking program, and acknowledge that Just Compassion may do several of those things, but they aren't intertwined when you're talking about one of them.
Absolutely. So Just Compassion is a vital resource in Tigard, and they do so many things. So they operate a resource center during the day. That is a center that provides 2 meals as well as a safe place where people can go and spend their time during the day. They also offer a congregate shelter in the evenings. That is 20 beds that are assigned to individuals. That is something that looks more like mattresses on a floor within what is their current resource center. So during the day, serves meals. In the evening, folks can sleep there at night. There is no barriers to being able to stay there overnight. So there's no background checks, no eliminating factors. Folks do get exited from the program, but it is very, very rare. And then we have things like the Safe Parking Program, which has a very high barrier. So for someone to enroll in that, they would have to pass all of the different checks that exist. In addition to that, Just Compassion also offers outreach services. So we heard from Mr. Peterson this evening. He goes out to talk to folks who are living outside. They also have housing case management on site. So those are the folks who are helping connect folks who have come up on the wait list for housing programs into housing. So doing a little bit of everything over there on Hall Boulevard.
Thank you. A lot of the comments, I think, especially in January, were received around concerns in the unfortunate incident in Beaverton in which an individual, lit himself on fire right outside of, or right next to a school. And I think, again, just because it was another Just Compassion site, can you talk about what circumstance that was in or the type of shelter that individual was in?
I don't believe we can talk about that. I don't believe that individual was enrolled in shelter as much as he was nearby an existing shelter.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Did you want to, I saw you reach for the button. Okay. You addressed it before, but I just want to ask again, for Beaverton and Redmond, have these programs resulted in an increased volume for police services in those locations?
Absolutely not. This program has not proven to provide any increased risk to the community or to children's safety, or any increased police calls.
And again, just to ask, because I think it's helpful, there was a lot of information. Are there people living in their cars in Tigard right now?
Yes, like I said.
Oh, you're turned off.
Yes, there are folks who are living in their cars right now. We believe that there are at least 19 households that are living in their cars that we know of right here. But as I said earlier, we know that that is a desperate undercount, probably to a factor of 5.
Has there been discussions, just again, it's been a topic of conversation about drug testing requirements to be approved to participate in the program?
Yes, speaking with potential service provider Just Compassion, we are open to putting in a drug testing requirement. We would have the drug testing requirement be required upon entry, but these are folks who are trying to get their lives together, several of whom will work non-traditional or not the 9 to 5 daytime hours. So drug testing on a regular basis may be prohibitive to someone actually being able to make progress on their case management plan, but definitely open to entry level or upon entry drug testing.
What happens when someone's exited from the program? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think similar to any of programming that has participants in a program, exiting is a conversation about what is the next step. There are a couple different factors. So often when talking to somebody about exiting from the program, sometimes we have folks who will self-resolve, say, you know what, this isn't the right fit for me, but I'm going to go stay with a family member, I'm going to go stay with a friend, I'm going to, move out of this area, whatever that might look like. We do have people who maybe have additional needs, so say, hey, I really need a shelter in this moment, I really need a different type of program, and it's working with other case managers to figure out how to get them on the wait list for that program so that they're able to transition. And then, of course, there are folks that don't want to continue progressing, that are asked to leave the program. as I think we've mentioned a few times tonight, with time, place, manner in effect there for Beaverton, I think similar for you, there's a 500-foot buffer around our safe parking sites. And so it is an expectation that people will leave, not just the safe parking site, but essentially the neighborhood that they're in as well. And if that does not happen, we have to involve law enforcement in next steps and in talking to them about what the consequences are looking forward.
Thank you. I'm looking at the city attorney just because I know in general we've had many conversations about our time, place, manner, and we acknowledge that our current code does not specifically include safe parking. Is that something that we're looking at adding to time, place, and manner to also provide the same buffer that we provide to shelters?
So that is one of the updates that we will be bringing to you when we do a report out of our current updates of our time, place, manner ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
And that is scheduled for May.
Excellent. The other thing I want to talk about, you did a great job, I think, talking about the different types of shelters that we have, but one of the things I hear about, especially because we talked about the $1 million that we put into A Bridge to Home along with Washington County, and I hear things like, well, we have a shelter now, why can't we put them there? Can you just address just super high level, or I guess in this specific circumstance, why if an individual is living in their car, they can't just go to A Bridge to Home?
So Bridge to Home is specifically for families, and a small number of beds are set aside for medically fragile adults. So not everybody would be able to qualify to stay at Bridge to Home, as is the same case with all of our population-specific shelters. And then also, as Megan spoke to, all of our shelters have a wait list. Every piece of the housing pipeline right now has a wait list. So having another available transitional shelter is key to giving as many folks as possible a safe place to lay their head at night.
Those are my million questions. I reserve the right to have more pop into my head. And I have done a lot of speaking, and I'd like to open it up to other counselors who may have additional questions. Or did I ask all of your questions? Yeah, Counselor, well, let's start with Youth Counselor Vogel.
Thank you so much for this. I know from my end, I really appreciate being in this conversation with community members and council, as well as the Youth Advisory Council being kind of in the early stages of this and what we thought about that as people that are looking to change that within our council. So my question was, for families that are residing in the safe lots, what does the transition or support look like for those that need educational help, transportation to school, how that fits in, especially if it would be on city property, what that would look like if there's help with that? And I know that can maybe tie into public transit, but kind of what that would look like, as well as just changing schools, and if that were to be taken into account for very going into kindergartners or even high schoolers, and what that looks like. And then I have another one. But.
That's a really great question. So for families that are staying in safe lots, a couple of things. I think one, most of the time they are on the family shelter wait list. If they aren't, when they come into the program, we immediately get them on that wait list. I would say almost all of our families, if they're not in housing before they're if they don't get into housing before they get into shelter, they get into Family Promise. That is the #1 referral source for families in safe parking, both Family Promise of Tualatin Valley and Family Promise of Greater Washington County. We work really closely with the McKinney-Vento program, which each school district has. And the McKinney-Vento program affords students certain rights if they're experiencing homelessness. Those rights include transportation and transportation to the school that they are already at. So we will actually have buses come to the safe parking program to pick up students and take them to the school that they were already going to, so that they're able to continue their education there, and then work with the McKinney-Vento liaison to see if there's any other resources that are needed, or depending on where they find housing, if we need to be able to transition school districts or anything like that. But they're a really important partner for us. They also refer into us, or we help talk about other types of programming that might be needed.
Thank you. And then just one more. For an elaboration on the storage facilities, does that look different for each person who comes in? Or is that a pretty like standard, like I guess like if you have a family come in, does that look different for more people that are there? Or is that pretty like consistent with each group?
Yeah, so the way our storage works, we have a pod on site. Generally, what we'll say is, you know, a third per any vehicle that's in the program. And of course, it changes. Some folks have less stuff, some folks have more stuff. We can provide individual like storage bins or racks in there and locks if needed. But really, everybody has worked well together, I think, to figure out how to use that space. Just Compassion has been really great about going and making sure that the space gets cleaned out if somebody gets exited, and you know, either having them come and pick things up or making room for other folks. Ultimately, the purpose of the storage space for us was it is very hard to sleep in your car at night. So just to make a little bit extra room to make that possible for folks, especially with families.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor Lubin. Thank you for your list of questions that certainly covered a lot of the territory. And I want to thank you both. Kim, thank you very much. If we don't have this conversation holistically about the problem, I think we're missing a huge opportunity. So thank you for a very thorough review. My question, Megan, and you can respond as well, Kim, for Redmond. I'm going to kind of jump into the facilities that are neighborhoods. So help me understand what the site improvements that have been required, and talk about the good neighbor agreements that got you to a successful relationship or for all parties involved. And then Kim, if you want to share anything about Redmond too, it'd be great.
Sure. Okay, so I'm trying to get all the sites organized in my mind. It's been a really great process, I think, because we have brought folks on who are adjacent to the property, and of course, they have concerns about the program that we need to be able to address as we've moved forward. It has looked like different things on every site. So I would say the majority of the sites do have residential neighbors. I'm thinking of one site in particular. It's so memorable to me because we had the site meeting, I think, like the day before the city shut down for COVID. So everybody was standing outside and having this conversation and trying to figure out how to move forward. But one of the things that I think Kim talked about was figuring out where to place it on the site. And some of the concerns the neighbors had were that if folks came in late at night from working their job or getting resources, that they would park and have lights that would reflect into homes that were adjacent. And so what came out of that is we had originally planned to have the parking spaces up against the neighborhood fence. And what we ended up doing was sort of moving it closer to the building, which originally was just not the spot that we had chosen, and also having it in the host site requirements that cars had to turn in facing away from the fence line from the neighbors. One other thing that resulted from that was quiet hours, and also trying to figure out where that sort of smoking location was going to be was also placed away from the fence line and away from like the building entrances as well too. So those are a couple examples just at one of our churches. We had another church where we also had selected a different location originally and decided to do a different spot on that site that was a little bit closer to their pantry at that time. It's sort of on a slope, so one of the things that ended up being helpful about that was that folks wouldn't have to sort of walk up or down to access the pantry, that they were closer to be able to walk in. And that is something actually that came out of neighborhood feedback as well in that process in trying to figure out what would work best. So those are a couple of examples that come to mind for me. Yeah.
I apologize. I don't know Redmond's detailed details nearly as well as I know Tigard and Beaverton now, so I'll leave it at Megan's answer.
Any additional questions, Councillor Wolf? Councillor Singh?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Kim and Megan, for this wonderful presentation, all your work that's gone through this, and all of our partners helping out with this process. So it seems like there's going to be conversations with immediate neighbors of the location, but I was wondering if we're also reaching out and hearing from those that this would serve. Are we planning on having one-on-one conversations with some of our houseless community members? I don't know if Beaverton did that, but just wondering, there's a lot of fear, and I think it's a chance to really humanize those that this would be serving. Tonight is the first time I actually heard directly from folks who have gone through this program, and I think we should be hearing from those who were served and really centering those community members. Instead of thinking about worst case scenarios, I think it's also an opportunity to think about how this program could turn out, even better than we can imagine. So more of a comment and a little bit of a question.
Thank you for your comment, Councillor. And yes, we will keep that in mind of trying to especially bring back, as the program gets started, more demographic information and success stories that we're expecting. Thank you.
Councillor Shaw?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Kim and Megan. Very comprehensive and thorough explanation, which I really appreciated. I also appreciate the commitment to resetting, building trust, and having the first step being on city-owned property. I think that will be important to get that data, and also creating the communications plan and the neighbor agreement, I think, will be key. So just want to thank you very much, one, for the examples from Beaverton, but also the commitment to that. You had mentioned that there was the permitting issue and that the city didn't have a voice in that. Is that state law?
Yes, that is state law. It is HB 2006. It's a House bill.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, yeah, I just want to check. Council President Hu?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Kim, and thank you for coming here for providing this useful information. And I also want to thank community members for their constant input. And I accompanied the mayor to the Christ the King Church meeting. I heard a lot of comments, and I also watched the Zoom video, and I read all the public comments you provided. So thank you so much for your input. I know, especially if you come to city council meeting, providing in-person comment, it could be intimidating. So I really really appreciate you taking the time to provide comments. And I think a lot of concerns are driven by fear, and fear is a good thing actually, because it's a human instinct. It helps us look things more closely and prevent us from making mistakes. We can avoid mistake all the time, but thankfully we can learn from the experience of Beaverton and Redmond, and we can move forward with this. So again, as Mayor and City Manager Reimer point out, this is just the beginning of the process. Please continue to provide your feedback, because we don't know what we don't know. And the good thing, as Mayor mentioned, is that if the city is funding this, we have the ability to put guardrail against anything that we don't think is right. But again, please keep an open mind, because this is a two-way street, right? If we try to really listen to you, please try to listen to the other side and welcome the data that's presented and challenge it if you think there's any flaw with it. I have 3 specific questions. One,
hold on 1 second.
Go ahead.
The bug that got hurt earlier is about to
Okay, all right. Thank you.
You saved your life.
Oh, I was not fearful that time, but okay. Yeah. So one common theme that I read from many comments is that, well, again, I appreciate the comment, because at first when I hear this program, it's like, wait a minute, this is 3 regular cars. There are no RV allowed, no trailer allowed, just 3 cars. So what's the problem? And of course, legitimate concern is that this is going to turn into a encampment, right? This 3 car, we're going to call their friends, and there will be more people coming. And I think you touch a little bit on this, is that the residents, at least in Beaverton and Redmond, is it Redmond or Ben? Redmond, okay. They are acting like neighborhood watch, right? They care about their own safety as well. So they are not going to allow that into a what so-called encampment. And another thing is that we talk about this, that whatever side, private side lease, that's another good thing about city funding is we can set the rules, is that we will require them to allow our police to, automatically, I don't know what's the technical term, issue trespass. We don't need private owners' permission to ask, say, hey, can we go, remove those unwelcome individuals. So I just want to ask again, have there any instances in Beaverton or Redmond where this safe parking lot become a mass encampment like people fear it will become?
In Beaverton, we have not experienced mass encampments. I think in 5 years, we've maybe had one situation that comes to mind where we had somebody who, learned where one of the safe parking sites was and drove up and parked there and didn't know that it was not an open program. And in that situation, we had somebody else in the program call, let us know. Also, because it's on a site where we have folks regularly, they checked in, the host site person checked in with our case manager as well too, and then they approached and had a conversation with her. It ended up being a situation where she was a good candidate for safe parking, and so figuring out how to go through the formal process and then place her in the appropriate site was, because we didn't have enough open spaces at the site she was at, was something that we went through in that process. But it's just having all the parties be aware, and it is written into the guest guidelines and the host site rules that you cannot have friends or other folks come on site. So we try to give folks other options, like meeting up with family at like the resource center or at our shelter or other places where they're able to reconnect if they want to do that.
Yeah, and I was saying earlier, Redmond had a similar experience where well-meaning folks who have heard of the safe parking program have directed folks to go and stay at one of those lots, but they had not been vetted or gone through the process. And so Redmond received the phone call from other folks who were staying at the site, letting them know that somebody who wasn't supposed to be there was there, and then they were exited. And like Council President who mentioned, we would require from any site that they sign a trespass order with the police department. Will be everybody who's working in this program, so the service provider, the host site, and the city would be constantly aware of who is and who isn't supposed to be on any given site, and so we'd be able to trespass without needing the property owner's direct involvement.
Thank you.
I'll just add really quickly, one thing that we did in Beaverton is we actually provide parking passes to folks who are enrolled in the program that can be put on their visor, and that's been helpful both as police go through the site to easily identify that this is somebody in the program, and it has also spurred neighbors to call and be like, hey, is this somebody that's in the program? And we're able to double check and be like, oh, yes, no, we need to follow up on that, whatever that might be. Sometimes it's just that somebody was recently placed and doesn't have that yet, but it's been a helpful tool for us to have that easy identification of who's in the program and not.
Thank you. And my second question is related to this, and I think it's already mentioned that many comments say, oh, those previous parking sites, there's the site location unknown, and Crest King is already public known, so we shouldn't go for it. But you already mentioned that, and I just want to reiterate that having the location disclosed is not a stop button for not going forward. Not having a site known is good for privacy and possibly administrative convenience, but having keeping the site secret is not an absolute requirement. I just want to emphasize that.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. My last question is that when another comment I heard pretty often is that having this program is somehow enabling people to live in their car, and I just want to point out the thing that you mentioned that jumped out to me is that even people with voucher in hand still have to wait for available housing. So, and if you don't really want to look for a housing, you have to exit this program. So in a way, I don't think this is true that this program will be enabling in any way. So I just want to confirm that's my understanding of what you're saying.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. This program does not enable anybody to live in their cars. None of our shelter programs have the goal of anybody staying within transitional shelter, especially safe parking. But safe parking will exit folks who are not working with their case manager towards permanent sustainable housing.
Thank you. That's all the question I have. Thank you.
Has a question popped into anyone else's head in the meantime? Well, thank you, Kim, and really thank you, Megan, for being here on Not Your City Council. It's been really helpful to be able to ask questions and have a briefing on this information. And again, I really appreciate the community that's here to listen tonight. We don't have any non-agenda items, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, I move to adjourn the meeting.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. Will the city recorder please conduct a roll call vote?
Mayor Lube?
Yes.
Just a moment here. Sorry, lost my spot. Councilor Shaw?
Yes.
Councilor Singh?
Yes.
Councilor Wolf?
Yes.
Council President Hu?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned. Good night, Tigard.